All right, let's get right into it. The headlines coming out of Minneapolis right now are painting this picture of a city completely torn apart, locked in a huge fight over immigration enforcement. But what our sources are saying is that what you're seeing on the news, well, it isn't the real story. It's not even close.
So that brings us to the big question we're tackling today. Are all these chaotic protests on the streets a genuine grassroots movement fighting for civil rights? Or are they actually a very sophisticated, well-funded smokescreen for something much, much bigger?
To really get what's going on, you have to look past the protests and do the one thing that always reveals the truth. You have to follow the money. And this whole thing, it really starts with a number you might have heard before. That number? $250 million. Now, you probably remember the Feeding Our Future scandal. It was this massive fraud scheme that siphoned off federal money that was supposed to be feeding hungry kids during the pandemic. It was a huge, huge story. But here's the thing. As federal investigators started pulling on that one thread, they realized pretty quick that feeding our future wasn't some isolated crime. No, it was just one symptom of a systemic disease that was infecting Minnesota's entire social service system. And this is what they found. $9 billion. That is the new federal estimate as of early 2026 for the total fraud across just childcare, Medicaid, and housing programs in the state. I mean, it's an almost unbelievable number that points to like a decade of just pure negligence and systematic theft. So you have to ask, right? How does a $9 billion crime stay hidden for so long? Well, the investigation points to this deeply tangled web, this relationship between the city's political establishment and the nonprofit worlds that was supposed to be helping the community. Now check this out, because this is where it gets really interesting. This slide maps out what investigators are calling the triple threat of fraud. On the left, you've got the fraud areas, nutrition, Medicaid, housing. But look at the right, the connection to the protests. Places that used to be meal sites in the food scandal, like Benedar Hall, are now the main organizing hubs for these anti-ICE protest networks. It's literally the same people in the same locations. And these connections, they go right to the top. We're talking about State Attorney General Keith Ellison, meeting with some of these fraudsters just weeks before the FBI raided them. City Council member Jamal Osman's own wife ran a sham meal site. And a top aide to Mayor Jacob Frey already pleaded guilty to wire fraud. This is not just a few bad apples. The investigation suggests the rot goes deep inside the city's leadership. Okay, so imagine you're part of this. You've got federal investigators closing in on a $9 billion scandal that implicates pretty much the entire state leadership. What do? Well, a new strategy was needed. And the strategy was, if you can't hide the crime, you change the conversation. You manufacture a whole new crisis. And this timeline just lays it out perfectly. Look at how fast this happens. In late 2025, a viral video shows these empty daycares getting millions in state funding. The fraud story just explodes. So the feds respond with Operation Metro Surge. And then boom, January 7th, the fatal shooting of Renee Good by an ICE agent completely flips the script. All of a sudden, nobody's talking about missing money anymore. Now it's all about federal overreach and tyranny. And that brings us to the core thesis of this whole investigation. The protests have a very specific, strategic purpose. By lighting this massive civil rights fire, the very people who are under financial investigation get to recast themselves as protectors of the community. And that makes it politically toxic, maybe even impossible, for federal auditors to keep digging into the money. Now, a crisis of this scale, it needs serious funding and organization. You can't just have protests spring up out of nowhere and last this long. So, where's the money coming from to keep the streets occupied and the federal agents distracted? The answer, according to investigators, is as cynical as it is brilliant. Investigators have basically mapped out this four-step playbook, this loop. Step 1, the $9 billion fraud gets exposed. Step 2, a crisis is created in response to the feds showing up. Step 3, money starts flowing to the protest groups. And finally, step 4, politicians use all that chaos in the streets as their political shield, claiming the financial audit is actually a racist attack. So how does this actually work? Well, the money is flowing through some very established channels. The Minneapolis Foundation, which is run by political insiders, is funneling millions in urgent grants to the exact same nonprofit networks that are linked to the political machine.
And get this, the Legal Rights Center is apparently using its government grants to bail out protesters who were arrested for obstructing a federal investigation into the theft of government money. You can't make this stuff up.
This slide right here just sums up the whole misdirection perfectly. The public narrative you're being sold is that the ICE surge is a racist attack on immigrants, but the investigative reality? It's a federal move to seize assets and records from what they believe is a massive money laundering operation. The public sees a civil rights movement. The investigation sees a cover-up designed to protect powerful people.
But, a fraud of this size, with this level of obstruction, it was bound to trigger an unprecedented federal response. The misdirection might be clever, but the federal government is now treating Minneapolis like a financial crime scene, and they have brought out the big guns.
One of those big guns is something called a geographic targeting order, or a GTO. This is a serious tool from the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Basically, it forces every single bank in Hennepin and Ramsey counties to report every transaction over $3,000 that's sent out of the U.S. It is a financial dragnet, plain and simple, designed to choke off these shadow money networks.
And the GTO is just one piece of the puzzle. The feds have also frozen all payments to 14 high-risk state programs. And maybe most importantly, the governor and the attorney general have both been subpoenaed by Congress. A contempt of Congress clock is now officially ticking. This thing has escalated way beyond a state scandal. We're talking about a full-blown constitutional crisis now.
Which, of course, leaves us with the final burning question. With the entire financial system under a federal microscope and the state's top leaders facing contempt of Congress, can the chaos on the streets, this manufactured crisis, can it really be enough to shield a crime of this size? In the end, the sources we've looked at conclude with this really powerful thought. The protests were never really about immigration. They were the frontline soldiers, the infantry, deployed with a single crucial mission: to guard the vault.